Hello everyone, it's Jen Scrapbena Creations. I'm super excited to be doing another collaboration with the fabulous Mary Polanco. Today we're doing 10 cards, 1 stamp, and Mary picked the stamp Super Dudes by Heffy Doodle. This is one of her all-time favorite stamps. And we thought it would be fun because you can use it for superheroes, but you can also do it for everyday heroes like teachers. So you'll see some examples. So if you're new to my channel, I typically include the coloring when I have stamped images, but for today, this video was already running long, so I've gone ahead, colored all my images, and cut them out. So moving on to card number 1, I'm going to do the traditional kind of superhero colors in the red and blue, and I'm going to create a city skyline here. So for my background, I'm using some Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm going to do some ink blending. So I'm using Tumbled glass, which is the lightest one that I'm using here, and I'm just going to cover that lightly over the entire panel for my card. I'm using Salty Ocean as my mid-tone color, and I just have a piece of scrap paper there under my fingers so I don't get any fingerprints on my panel here. For the darkest color, I'm using chipped sapphire. I'm just going to use this pretty lightly around the top and a little bit down the sides. Now this panel is an A2 size panel at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I am going to create a landscape card. So that darkest part will be at the top of the card. Just blending those together. I'm not too worried because a lot of this is going to get covered up by the cityscape that I'm going to have at the bottom, and then our little superheroes and the sentiment. So I'm just bringing that tumbled glass back in just to blend that back out. Then I'm going to put it in my mini Misty, use my embossing buddy here just to make sure that my embossing powder doesn't stick where I don't want it. Now you'll see here in a bit it does a little bit, only because my ink wasn't fully dry. But that's okay. The embossing powder that I'm using won't stick to the background. So I'm using this fun little shooting star to create some interest in the background, and then I'm going to use the solid star stamp from the stamp set just to fill in some of those areas. I just want to add some fun to the background, and if you wanted to skip this step, you definitely could. I think it would be a really cute card if you added some clouds into the sky as well. So I'm just going to get that inked up with my Versamark ink, which is a sticky ink for heat embossing, and I'm going to be using the Wow Metallic Silver Sparkle. So you're going to see here when I pour this on, it is sticking to my background despite using the embossing buddy, and that is just because my ink is still a little bit wet. Now this is a thicker embossing powder, and with the glitter, once I put the heat tool to it, it's not going to stick in the areas where there's no ink. So I'm not too worried here. And even if it does, the extra little sparkle for this card isn't going to be a big deal. So I just need to make sure all of my stamped images have good coverage with the embossing powder. And then I can go ahead and heat emboss that, and you'll see this becomes really shiny. It's so pretty. Now I did have my heat gun warming beside me for a while. You don't want to have a cold heat gun coming to your paper. It will warp it more. So just to get some of that excess powder off, I am just going to use a microfiber cloth here and wipe that away, and you can see most of it did not stick to the background. Now because I had a little bit of warping, I'm going to add some self-adhesive fun foam to the back. This will just help straighten that out, and I will have something heavy sit on that for a while. I did need to trim up that one side of the fun foam, and now we can go ahead and create the scene. So I'm using a Cityscape die by MFT. This is retired. I will link below to one that's very similar from Sunny Studio, which is still available. So if you like this type of die, you still can get one that's similar, and all the products that I'm using today will be listed in the description box below. So now I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I needed to take that foam piece out because I have the foam already on the back. So now this will be nice and level in my Misty. And I'm going to stamp the sentiment, "You are super." At first, I thought I wanted to use the sentiment, "Have a super birthday," but I couldn't quite fit it in the area that I had left for the sentiment without it touching either the buildings or some of those stars that I heat embossed. So I'm just going to go with the smaller sentiment, which is really cute. And I love how the words super and my hero in this stamp set is kind of a double lined. It's really cute. So I'm just going to stamp this out with my Versafine Clair Nocturne ink once I get that all in line. Just making sure that I have that positioned properly, and then I will stamp this out a couple times just because I think that background ink is still slightly damp, so I just want to make sure that this black ink is nice and crisp, and the Versafine Clair Nocturne ink is perfect for that. So there's my sentiment stamped out, and I like how the black picks up on the black of the buildings. And I'm just going to position my little super dudes here flying through the air. Now with that cityscape building, you can add color behind the windows. I thought it would be fun to kind of have that blue sky popping through, but I will do a yellow cardstock behind it for the next card. Now it wasn't my plan to bring the little Supergirl in, but I felt like I needed that third character just to balance off the card. Otherwise, I felt like that bottom portion just would have been too empty. So I really like how this looks with the three superheroes. And I love the pop of red for this card as well. The blue in their uniforms goes with the background, and then that pop of red really sticks out. So to add some final details, I'm going to add a white gel pen. I prefer the Sakura Bold number 10. It gives you a nice thick line for some of your highlights. For the little crest on their outfits with the heart, I'm going to use a silver sparkle pen around the heart, and then my black glaze pen, which almost gives an embossing look, just to finish that off. And I love how this card turned out. Moving on to card number 2, I'm going to create a mini slimline. So this will be 3 inches by 6 inches. For the background, I'm just going to do a light blending with the tumbled glass. I just want to give a little bit of color to the background, but I still have quite a bit of white showing. So here's where I was talking about that I added some pattern paper. You could add yellow cardstock. I just had these little scraps from the paper pad that I'm using for many of these cards. And I'm just going to cut off half of this so that the bottom of my mini slimline has this fun building detail. And I like how the length of the mini slimline just gives me a little bit more room at the top for my superhero, but also has that fun detail with the buildings to the bottom. And I'm just adding my stamp block on that just to make sure it's good and adhered to my card panel. So I am going to stamp my sentiment. Now you may notice here the top of this, it wasn't cut quite straight, so it's kind of bending in my MISTI. I will fix that up here in a second. I'm just trying to figure out which sentiment I want to use, and I felt like this one could kind of be used for anyone who is a hero who has done something nice for you, even like a frontline worker or anyone in your life. So the sentiment that I'm stamping out, I have my hero to the top, and then you see there I did cut this sentiment, the longer one, in half here, and it reads, "The world needs more people like you." Such a great little sentiment. So I'm just trying to make sure I get that where I want it so it's not touching the side or the top of that tallest building. And here's where I'm going to take out the panel, and I'm just going to trim that down a little bit. I'm not sure why I had cut that wonky, but now it fits perfectly into my mini MISTI, and I can go ahead and stamp that sentiment again. And if you wanted to, I think it would look great with the My Hero in a colored ink as well. I'm just keeping it nice and simple with the Versafine Clair Nocturne ink. So So now that I have my sentiments stamped out, I have my little flying hero here, and I colored him up in a yellow and teal or aqua color. And then I'm going to use the little clouds that are in this stamp set, which are so fun to create your scenes. There's 3 different sizes. I'm using all 3 of them here. And I love how this just balances out the scene. So once I get the clouds in place, I'm going to adhere down my little superhero flying towards the building. And then I can just trim off that little bit of the cloud that was left off the side of the card. And then for the clouds, I'm just going to add some Nuvo glitter pen just to give them a little bit of shimmer, and then add a highlight line on the cape, and card number 2 is complete. For card number 3, which as you can see is not a card at all, I decided to do something different, and I'm using the Trinity stamps. These are the mini Slimline and envelope dies. They're really cool. I'm bringing in the Rainbow Bright 6x6 pattern paper from Sunny Studio, just trying to use up this paper pad. It's an older one. And yeah, I'm going to create some bookmarks. I thought it would be fun. These would be a great teacher gift, or if you know someone who's been at home teaching kids online, this is just a fun little gift that would make their day, I think. So for the back of the bookmarks, I did use some heavier weight cardstock, and then I added the pattern paper to that. So I'm just going to stamp out my sentiment here with my Versamark ink again. I'm going to do some heat embossing. This time though, I'm going to use some white embossing powder, and that will really pop off the bookmarks. So as you can see, I'm doing one in an orange and kind of aqua color theme, and then I'm going to do one in a pink and yellow theme with the little Supergirl here. So the Supergirl, the sentiment is going to be "You are super," and then for our little boy, it says "You are my hero." Such great little sentiments to just make someone happy who's done something special for you. So here's where I'm going to add my embossing powder to both of the bookmarks. I just want to make sure I have good coverage over that ink. Again, I used my embossing buddies to make sure that that embossing powder didn't stick anywhere I didn't want it to. So you can see once you add your heat, the embossing powder raises and you get this really pretty shiny raised effect for whatever it is you're embossing. I really love the look of the white on these as well, with those really pretty bright colored cards, or not cardstock, paper, pattern paper for the main area of the bookmark. So here's where I'm going to add these on to the bookmark, and there is a stitch detailing. So whenever I'm adding pattern paper or cardstock over top of something and using cardstock on the bottom to make it sturdy, I make sure that that stitching detail is to the back. So this way, when the recipient turns over the bookmark, you may want to write a message on the back. You have that nice stitch detailing on the back, and then you have it on the front as well with whatever it is you're using. So in this case, the pattern paper. So I'm using my Barely Art glue here. I'm just going to adhere these to my bookmarks. I'm using 100-pound accent opaque paper, which is listed below. You can get it off Amazon. It is super affordable. Mary Polanco actually was the one who introduced me to this paper, and I use the 80-pound for all the coloring I do for my images. So I absolutely love this paper. So now I'm just going to get my images ready here to figure out where I want to place them on the bookmark. And I'm going to use some of the starbursts and then some of the clouds just to fill out the bookmark. And I really like how these turned out. I'm really happy with all the projects. I had a ton of fun with this stamp set. It is an older stamp set, but I don't know, there's just some that you have in your collection that you can go back to over and over. And for the next few cards, I'm going to pair them with some of the new release products that just came out from Heffy Doodle. So I think it's always fun to play with what you have in your stash and integrate them with new things that you bring into your stash. So thanks, Mary, for choosing this stamp set. It's really, really, really sweet. And I have made a card before. I'll try to remember to link it. And I did, card making is my superpower, I think is the sentiment. There is a little card included in this stamp set, so it's really fun. So for the little girl here, I'm going to have her standing to the bottom of the bookmark. I'm just trying to figure out how many of those starbursts I want and then where to put the clouds. I did bring in one of the open stars from the stamp set here. I found that there was less room for accents for this bookmark just because she took up a little bit more space on the bottom. But I am eventually going to find placement that I love. But you can see here, sometimes it always doesn't come together so quickly. So don't be afraid to play around and move your images around until you get something that you're really happy with. I do decide to add the cloud behind her head, which just kind of gives this look of continuation behind her. So I'll just have that peeking out. I'll glue her down, and then once she's in place, I'll just add a little glue behind that cloud and then trim off the side that's overhanging. I'll get everything else in place. It is always good to have some of your images when you're creating a scene kind of coming off of either your card or in this case your bookmark. It gives the illusion of continuation. So play around with that as well. Have some of your elements kind of hanging off and then trim them up. So this starburst at the bottom is a really good example of that. You'll see the difference once I trim that off. How great it looks, just have it looking like it's coming from off of the bookmark onto our scene. I'm just trying to be careful cutting these because I do have some glue on the back. I decided to bring in a star for the little Superboy card, and I did play with that little lightning that comes in the stamp set as well, but I decided against that, but I did add one of the stars. So to finish these off, I'm going to add some ribbon to the top, just looping that ever so easy. I'll do the same for both. This is just some ribbon I got at Dollar Tree, I believe. It has like an iridescent shine to it. It's really pretty. So there's a look at both of the bookmarks complete. For card number 3, I am going to show you here. These are the pencil heart dies. I forget the exact name. I do have it linked below though in the die section of the product list in the description box. This is super fun because it comes with the word color, but it also has the U. So if you're like me, in Canada or the UK or elsewhere where you spell color with a U, this is perfect. I'm so happy to have this in my stash. But this is I think it's the pencil heart die. So you get the die that cuts out the back where you can either color or add paper piecing here like I did. So I used some of that rainbow pattern paper from Sunny Studio, and I'm creating some rainbow colored pencils. And this was a great way to use up the tiniest of scraps that I had for this paper pad, and I love the look it gives. So I find the easiest for this because there's the little tips of the pencil, and then there's that kind of middle piece where you would have, I guess in a traditional pencil, it's kind of wood. So I find it easiest to cut that out with your die cut machine and kind of leave it in place, and then take them one by one. And I'm just using my embellishment wand here to get that in place. So it has a sticky side, and then it has a little pointy side, which helps to just make sure your die cuts are in place. It's also great for sequins and stuff. Now for the little tips of the pencil, I'm going to use my Copic markers here. You can use anything, colored pencils, markers, gel pens, whatever you want. And I'm just going to color those so they match the color of my colored pencils. And this just adds a fun little detail. Now, you can make these look like pencils with a yellow body and then have like a black for the tip. which looks really great. The design team came up with some really great projects using this die set. So this is super fun. I love the heart shape. It's very unique. I haven't seen anything quite like this. I'm just going to get those tips of the pencils in place, and you can see how this really finishes it off. Now, when I showed you the dies, I forgot to show you, I had them on my desk. There's little add-ons. Well, they're not add-ons. They're included in the die set, but it allows you to have a heart decoration on the body of the pencils. It's really cute. So I just have 2 more left to get into place, and you can see I was quite close, so little wisps of my hair was getting into the shot, but I wanted to make sure that I got these lined up, and I did use my tweezers. I prefer the reverse tweezers. I find them really easy to use, and it just helped me get those in place. Now for the white on the pencils, I did want to add a little bit of shading, so I'm bringing in my C1 marker, and then I'll blend that out just a little bit with the colorless blender. This will just add a little bit of dimension to the top of those pencils. So this is going to be a very clean and simple card design. I'm going to have my heart pencil to the top kind of mid portion of my A2 size card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I am going to add the stamp block again just to make sure that's good and adhered. And then I chose the little super dude. I colored in purple and green. Now this little crayon is from the Teacher's Pet stamp set, and I'll show you that here in a second because I am going to bring that in for one of my cards. So I think this is a fun teacher, or if you're a parent and you've been homeschooling, this is a really fun card for that. I love the brightness of this card with the rainbow pattern paper, and then I colored him up nice and bright too. So I'm just adding some cardstock under the back of him so that the back is at the same level as the pencils that he's resting on. I am going to cut this long sentiment as well, so hold your breath if you don't like seeing people cut up their stamps. I've always said if it makes it easier for you to use them, go ahead and cut them. I just bend them back on themselves so you can really see a separation in the words, and then I cut along that line. So I'm going to use the sentiment, hope your day is as super as you are. So you can see how this stamp set can really be used for multiple occasions. I did think about using the My Hero sentiment at the top or perhaps at the bottom, but I just felt like it was going to fill the card up too much. So I could stamp that on the inside of my card. But I am going to just leave this fairly simple. I'm going to add that silver sparkle pen to the crest and then the black glaze pen. And then I thought I'd bring in one of the starbursts. I didn't really know where I wanted to add this, and then I play around with multiple of them to see if I want to add these and kind of fill out this card a little more. In the end, I choose the one purple one here behind him, and I think that looks really cute. It helps with the illusion of him flying through the air. I did think the one looked nice to the right side of him as well, so there's that card complete. Now moving on to card number 5, the last card. This is also a new die from Heffy Doodle. I'll show you the stamp sets here first. So this is the Teacher's Pet. It's one of the early releases from Heffy Doodle, but it's so fun for teaching. And this is Homeschool Hero. So this is part of the new release, and I'm going to use the sentiment Homeschool Hero for this card using the pattern paper again. And here is the new slider pop-up die from Heffy Doodle. Now, if you've watched one of my recent videos with Doodlebug in a collaboration with Christy Marcotte, I created a card with this. It's super easy. It's 2 pieces and it creates a really fun interactive card. So here's an example. I made this for the product release photos, and I used the new Pandtastic Painters stamp set, the little pandas. So I thought it would be fun to do one with the Super Dudes. And I know this is a 1 stamp 10 card video, but I also wanted to show how you can use your stamps with things that you might already have to create some really fun cards. So don't be afraid to play around with stamps that you already have in your stash. Okay, so The die cuts out your top panel here, which has the fold lines to create your mechanism for your slider pop-up. Super easy. I use my bone folder just to get a really good crease. You can see here I cut it out of a piece of pattern paper, so this does fit for a 6x6 piece of paper. Then you have the internal piece that brings that piece of paper up to slide. I cut that out of some green pattern paper. And then the background is just a cardstock panel at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 that you can cut yourself. Now I use the Slimline pull tab dies from Heffy Doodle to cut out the tab on the back. It just makes it easier for the recipient to grab that little internal piece of paper. And I'm using some of the new Heffy Doodle foam strips around this, so you want to make sure you're on the outer edges of this panel so that the piece of paper on the inside can slide easily. And then you want to add a piece of foam tape to the back bottom of the piece that will slide back and forth. So super easy. What I love about the Heffy Doodle foam tape is it's double width, so you only need one layer. And you can see there I went ahead and stamped my sentiment on the inside of the card before adhering this all together. It's your preference. I just find it easier. If you want to make sure you get it centered, you could outline that inside piece and put it in your MISTI. So here's where I'm inserting that piece of pattern paper. So you're just going to want to peel that off. Now there's two ways you can do this. So you can do it like I'm doing here first, where you just line it up to the bottom, but you're going to see a little bit of that inside. You can see that green popping out. So if you don't like that, you can pull up the panel a little bit and you can just match it to the bottom of that internal piece, and then you don't see that. So it's whatever you prefer. So that's sliding really nicely. Now I'm going to work on my little chalkboard here. So this is from the Teacher's Pet stamp set. How cute is this? I'm going to stamp the Homeschool Hero, and then it has like 2+2, A+, and I'm going to stamp that on here as well, and then I'm going to heat emboss it with white embossing powder, because I mean, how cool is that? It actually looks like a chalkboard, and with the coloring I just used my C color, which is the cool gray, so I did darker to the outsides and the bottom, and then left quite a bit of a white highlight to make it look like this chalkboard has been well used. But I love the way this looks, so I'm just going to heat emboss this, and now I can go ahead and create my card. So for this, when this pops up, I want the chalkboard to stand out, so I'm going to have it halfway. Now I don't know if you can tell, but there is a crease line there to the center of that panel, so I'm just going to adhere the bottom of the chalkboard. Now if you want this to be heavier cardstock, I would suggest using like 110 pound or 120, but it works just fine with a lighter cardstock. I think for this one I used 100 pound. So that's going to be behind our little superhero, our homeschool hero. So I'm going to have her to the bottom left, and you want to make sure that she's, or whatever you put down there, is above that crease line. Wasn't quite sure my layout, so I have my little, this is like a baseball card holder, so I just have that to the side so I can play around with this. I wanted the second superhero, but it wasn't quite fitting. So then I'm going to add some of the accessories from the Teacher's Pet. So there's the stack of books, and I'm going to add 2 on top of each other. There's the apple, and then there's the little book bag, which is so cute. So I'm going to have the stack of books beside her, and I'm going to add the apple to the top of that. And then I'll add the book bag to the right-hand side of the books. I will bring in, there's a little notepad as well, which is really cute, and then one of the crayons. And I'll add that to the right side just to fill up that bottom portion of this little scene here on my slider pull out. Trying to get him on. I decide to put him up at the top. Now he hangs over the pull tab a little bit, but I think that's okay. And he kind of comes off the top of the card, but I just think it gives a really fun look. I'm just making sure it doesn't get in the way of that slider mechanism. And then I'm going to use one of the dies from the Slimline pull tab dies, which is really fun. So it cuts out this little panel that you can add to the opening of the pull tab, and it's got the little arrow on it. So I cut the main piece with some yellow cardstock, or pattern paper, sorry, and then I cut the little arrow out with some red. So I think it will stand out and the recipient will be able to see that arrow and know to pull quite easily. Now you can leave it without adding the little insert of the arrow, but I think this, because this card was so bright with so many colors, I thought it was fun to add the red. So I decided to add one of the crayons to the inside. If you add an image to the inside, it will help hold up your slider. So see how that sits really cool? So there's card number 5 complete. We are going to slow this down and I'm going to show you all 5 of the cards or the projects. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I can't wait to see what Mary came up with. You know, our styles are very different, but that's what I love about doing collabs, is we each come up with very unique ideas, and it gives, hopefully it gives you all some inspiration to get out your stamp sets and play around and have fun with them and create multiple cards. So thanks everybody for watching. Have a fantastic or super day. I hope you enjoyed this collaboration. Thanks for watching. Bye.